All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our BEAD office hours for the challenge phase. My name is Laura Sasaki. I am one of the program and project supervisors here in the BEAD branch at the CPUC, and just want to welcome you this afternoon. We'll go over some housekeeping items and agenda. A lot of you are familiar with the process, but for those of you who are new, welcome. If we can go to the next slide, we'll kind of walk through what the process looks like. So we'll go over the housekeeping items. Sam, can you go back one? Thank you. And then just kind of how the Q&A works if you are not familiar with that. And then we'll go into the Q&A and then talk about kind of what the next steps are and reminders. So similar format to what we've done before. So next slide, we'll go over the housekeeping. For those of you who are new, what we've asked you to do is if you can write your questions in the chat. We will go in the order that they've come in, and we may need some clarification, in which case we'll ask you to unmute yourself and then maybe have a little bit of back and forth on just making sure that we're understanding the question so we can answer it appropriately. So we'll also go through a first round of questions so that everyone has a chance to ask their question. And then after that, we'll be able to open up additional questions. Because we have a lot of questions that have come through that tend to be a little bit more complex, what we're trying to do is for round one, keep questions at about 5 minutes so that we're able to get through everyone's questions here today. If you have a follow-up question, please just write it in the chat. We'll call on you in that same order. On the next slide, let's see, is the next slide just going into Q&A? Oh, there we go. Again, just kind of a refresher for those of you who are joining us for the first time, that this is your opportunity to ask us questions about the challenge process in general. And just a note, because it's come up several times, we cannot provide specific feedback on evidence for challenges that is done with the within the challenge process. So please just know that, and we appreciate your understanding. We are required to follow the rules of the BEAD program, which is administered by NTIA. Q&A from the meeting will be posted in the FAQ on our website. And as we noted earlier, we are recording this session and it will be posted as well. So I believe it is time to go into our Q&A. All right, so our first question, can you please walk through an area challenge in the portal? I see a separate menu for MDU, but not area challenge. So Clay, I am going to turn that over to you.
Absolutely. Let's see. So we want to see an area challenge with 6+ locations in the portal.
Correct.
Okay. Now, is there a specific type of area challenge? Because it does depend on the type of challenge.
You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
It's availability challenge.
Okay, availability. Good deal.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see if that is allowed. Right. All right. So we're going to go through. Quick reminder at the top, this is a test environment filled with demo data, just for everyone's awareness. So what we'll do is go in and do an availability challenge. So we would want to go in and do provider service level and then click through to availability. This is not an MDU challenge. And then we will go in and select the reason. So here we go. We'll go through, just select a random ISP. And notice here how when you click through provider and technology type, it does filter the map down according to what is reported. So our next step here, so we can get up to 250 results in this type of challenge. And so what you can do is there are a couple of different methods, and those are on previously published videos on how to get these locations in. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the shift and click method. So I'll go in and grab these locations. So 161, which is below that 250 threshold. I'm going to confirm. It's going to pull these different locations in. So as you're doing your review, if you need to click on one of these locations and remove it, you certainly can. And then the next step here, it's going to walk you through the evidentiary requirement for this type of challenge, what is requested, what's needed, and then you can upload your evidence. We recommend that you download the evidence spreadsheet, which gives you a good template, and it also loads in the location IDs that you are trying to challenge. So your evidence type, evidence file, request date, and description. And once you have that filled out, you can go in, upload that data, and then evidence for each location below. So this would be multiple files. Go in, confirm, and submit the challenge after you have attested to the accuracy of this. And after everything has been uploaded, you will see this reflected back on your dashboard.
Thank you, Clay. Just want to confirm that that answered the question that you had.
Yeah, can with the Excel template, if we don't use that, can we, post all the snap screenshot in the Word document in just one document for the 6 locations that we submit as evidence?
So I'm actually going to have Phil address that because from a review of evidence kind of standpoint, want to just confirm that that is something that can or may not work. And you're muted.
And thank you for your question. As long as the evidence is submitted for the availability challenge and the type of challenge is in accordance with the instructions in the IPv1 and in the user guide, you can provide a Word document with the evidence, the screenshots, whatever you wish to provide for that particular set of challenges.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Okay, our next question is from Ben, and I think that this is going to be both a question for Clay and for Phil. The question is, the challenge portal still does not allow a provider to challenge an unserved location to underserved. It only allows a location to be challenged or changed to served. Is this planning to be corrected prior to the challenge window closing? So Clay, I think part of it is there the capability of doing that within the portal, and then the second piece for Phil is I think just verifying if the statement is accurate as well.
Sure. Yes, the capability does exist within the portal. And I think if there are any specific locations where this is not allowed, if you could send those addresses to the help desk, we'd be happy to look into it further.
And then Phil, I think the other question is, does it allow for flipping the way that the question is framing it?
I think Clay actually answered that question pretty clearly. The portal essentially reflects the information that was pulled based on the fabric version and the date that is specified in the approved IPv1. Whatever information came off of the 4 service levels and availability comes off of the FCC map as of that date. Challenges to that information, you have a whole variety of challenges that are available to you. You can provide challenges based on availability, on speed, incorrect technology. There's a whole variety that you can put. There's planned service challenges or existing service challenges. And if the challenge is not available through the portal, the other approach obviously is to update the availability information based on a filing, which is typically allowed at certain times in the year. I think the new one's coming up in September to correct what's on the map. I hopefully that answers your question there, Bruce. I mean, Ben.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So are you saying that after the challenge window closes, that unserved locations on the challenge map can be changed after the window closes by the BDC submission coming up in September?
There is always the opportunity to change the information, the availability information through filings. So if you believe something is incorrect on the map, a submission can be made to the FCC through the BDC portal with the correct information, and it will be reviewed and updated.
So the challenge map is changeable after the challenge window closes.
Well, I want to be very clear on terminology, Ben. The challenge map is the challenge process. The availability information in the FCC map is gradually updated at specific times during the year based on filings, and it will also be updated and adjusted after the challenge process. That is correct. But that map is constantly being updated based on filings from different providers.
So that update map will be applicable at any time that somebody applies for BEAD funding based on the current version of BDC data plus the results of the challenge window, correct?
That is the intent of the BEAD challenge process. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Ben?
Well, it's you indicated that it is possible to challenge or change. I'm assuming that both those words mean the same thing. An unserved location to a underserved location. You're saying that is possible.
That is correct.
I can't see that at the existing service challenge type. It does not allow any speeds entered under 100 meg down and 20 meg up. In other words, underserved instead of served. It does not allow that challenge to even be entered.
Oh, that's right. Yep. No, I apologize. Yes, you are correct on that. So the limiter is built because the challenge type as it's specified, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's meant to get in the appropriate level of service for a served location.
Speeds. Yes, served speeds. That is correct.
Right.
So it does not allow changing the status of a location from unserved to underserved.
Correct, because per the guidance, you are challenging a location up to the level of served speeds, which are 100 by 20 and under 100 milliseconds latency.
So then the only way the resulting map at whatever time someone looks at it will only be accurate after the BDC submission in September.
That's a correct statement, Ben. If you wish to change the status of a location from unserved to underserved, the filing would have to occur. You'd have, whether it gets done in September or the following window, but that would be the only way you'd be able to change that status from unserved to underserved. That's correct.
So the map after September will be used to determine funding for BEAD.
At the end of the challenge process, and I'm sorry, Laura, is there something you wanted to say? Go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just saying potentially, right? Because there's timing always is a factor. And I think we have Amy on the call as well. But and Amy, maybe this is something that you can speak to just from your experience, but there's sort of a staggered process, if you will, because different states are doing things at different times. And so the map will be updated, but I'm not sure what the typical process is for that being kind of rolled out and then being implemented in a program. Amy, do you have any just feedback based on your experience and what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Laura, you represented this well, as did Phil, that the timing, it's really dependent on what's available at the time. And so just remember that this map is ultimately a snapshot in time, and it is likely that BDC data that's added in the fall, you know, there will have to be, you know, the state will review that data and determine whether it can update the map accordingly, but also NTA ultimately gets to weigh into that process and how that looks. And there are the other timing issue at play is obviously the sooner the state has the data ready, once it has IPv2 approval, that data, as you recall from the policy notice and CPUC's guidance, is that that data has to be available for 60 days before selecting any sub-grantees. So there are a number of timing issues at play. So ultimately, I would recommend then is to use this as your best opportunity to update the map to the extent that you can.
Great, thank you, Amy. I think we're going to move on to our next question, which is from Carolina. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, please put them in chat. We're going through them in order, and we'll read them out, and then if we need additional clarification, we'll call on you. So our next question is, what is the process if one location should have two separate challenges? For example, a location should be recognized as a CAI, and once it's categorized as a CAI, qualifying broadband service is not available. That is a good one. So I'm going to let Phil and Clay, I'll let you decide who takes first stab at that one.
Wow, that's a good question, Caroline, and I appreciate it. That's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? The challenge process is not designed that you would enter one challenge and it would be immediately approved and recognized. It has to go through the whole process before it's essentially adjudicated during the final determination phase. So if you challenged a location and you wanted to challenge it as a CAI and it's not currently recognized as a CAI, that would not be finalized until the end of the challenge process. However, you would not be able to challenge it as not having qualifying broadband available, as it would not have been approved to be a CAI. So you could not really do both of those challenges during the challenge process. You could, however, I'm not sure really, and you know what, I'm going to ask Clay to jump in, because this is sort of I don't think you could do both challenges. It would have to be one through the process and then another after the challenge process.
Right. It does sort of depend on the scenario. I would recommend reading the addendum that talks about some of the nuances between BSLs and CAIs. However, for the scenario that you mentioned, you do specify the current level of service as part of that challenge, the is CAI challenge. And also, presumably, it's a BSL that you're challenging that should be CAI. So if the service at that BSL is not represented accurately, you could send an additional challenge for the BSL. And then the resulting level of service determined to be at that location would then dictate whether or not that CAI has a qualifying level of service. So kind of a lot in that answer, but it is a tricky situation. Yeah, very good question.
Okay, and I do want to go back to Travis just to let you guys know, if I skip over a question, it's because it's not showing up in my chat. And I know this has happened in not these sessions, but other webinars I've been on, like with NTIA. that some of the questions that are put in chat are not always showing up to everyone. So having said that, I don't have visual on that. So Travis, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, I apologize for.
Oh, okay, sure. It was kind of related to the first question, and it may have been covered, but what is the process by which the area challenge can be submitted by permissible challengers? We have evidence, but haven't uploaded it from individuals, and just trying to confirm the process that we're doing it, or that we know what it is. We have screenshots and copies of emails saying the consumers couldn't be served by the stated technology, such as, you know, an email screenshot of, you know, Optimum is not able to serve this address from 6 individuals within a census block group. So do we submit those individually, or do we create an area challenge and then upload the screenshots that they've given us as evidence?
I think I'll go to Clay on that, because I know we just walked through what an area challenge looks like, and I think that that's probably where you would submit that. So Clay, even if I don't know if you're at the end of those screens, but if you can maybe just show, not necessarily go through the whole process, but what happens when you get to the end.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I had clicked away from that. But Travis, what you just described is accurate. And Phil, keep me honest here, but I believe individual challenges are what trigger an area challenge. So when you have these 6 in a qualifying census block. So the process, you can enter all those in at once by selecting those locations, but you do want to upload the evidence for each of those individual spots within the census block group, or as much evidence as you have for each of the individual locations in that census block group. And then that will trigger an area challenge because it qualifies as 6 within that area.
Okay. And if I could kind of ask a related question, I didn't want to take up too much time. We could move on to the next question, but it's somewhat related. That if we have bulk UCLA data that's not related to individuals who have taken tests or received emails, can we summarize that? Is that acceptable evidence to summarize and create an area challenge on our own as a nonprofit, but that doesn't involve any individuals doing speed tests at a home location?
I can answer that one, Clay, if that makes sense. There are very specific guidelines in IPv1 as to what is acceptable as speed test evidence. And I do not believe bulk speed test information from UCLA is one of those options. The speed test typically for challenges would be through individual challenges collected over a period of time, and then they are consolidated and then they're submitted as evidence. If the evidence is correct and it follows the guidelines, it will be evaluated during the approval process, and it will either be approved or rejected.
And Phil, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason for that is you would have to be at every single one of those locations to be able to actually run that speed test. So that piece of gathering the information is kind of why it's a little bit trickier to do what you're describing.
Okay, so to create an area challenge, you would need to rely on individual speed tests. Is there any other way to create an area challenge just as a nonprofit that doesn't involve doing public outreach and collecting individual speed tests and emails and screenshots?
So I believe it's 6 challenges within a census block by challenge type and provider. Mm-hmm. So that being said, it could be availability, it could be what are all the different challenge types in that category? It could be any combination of 6 of those different challenge types going to the same provider. That would also trigger an area challenge.
But the evidence needs to be from individuals taking speed tests within their own homes or providing screenshots or emails. There's nothing we can do to create those area challenges as a nonprofit without that specific evidence.
Amy, go ahead.
So that is definitely, can I answer, Laura, if that's
Yeah,
okay?
please.
So that is definitely true of speed tests, right? The speed tests, as Laura noted, were very specifically designed that way so that they could be most accurate and closest to the residential gateway of each individual location. And they have to be, you know, three different speed tests on different days. There's a series of rules around that, as Phil noted. The availability challenges and other challenges do not necessarily, you may want to consider looking at something where, you know, you don't necessarily have to be at an individual location with some of the other technology availability challenges that may be available.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to our question from Kevin. Interested in doing an area challenge for licensed by rural fixed wireless carrier that has no active service in the area, nor any clear plan to do so. In the FAQ, there is method of challenges not being adjudicated that are subject to enforceable commitments. Are these enforceable commitments shown on the challenge map, or do we need to chase that down on our own? So I am going to, again, this will probably be a combination of Phil, Amy, and Clay.
Clay, do you want to show how this looks on the challenge maps? Sorry, Phil.
That's not a problem. Yeah, I can essentially talk to that directly. Locations on the challenge map that are basically funded by an enforceable commitment will show very clearly when you go to a specific location. And Clay, good timing. If you'd like to pop in and just provide an example of a location that is under an enforceable commitment, that would be great.
Sure. So let's see. So we go. All right, so we have these different funded locations. And then it would be either you're wanting to say that it is covered by enforceable commitment, which would not be these locations, or not covered. So if these locations are showing up as covered, then what you would want to do is not covered. Next, select the funding program, and this will drop the map down for you automatically. So let me, sorry, to make it a little bit more clear, I'm going to hide the census blocks. And so if I'm looking at, let's say, RDOF, gigabit speed, or let's put a baseline. Okay, there's a group here. So this is a oh, sorry, it's going to condense again. So we try to build in some limits to help you hone in on what you're actually challenging, so you don't have to do that homework on your own. But as you can tell, it's making it a little bit difficult for me to find it on the map. So Phil, if you want to keep talking through while I'm looking for these. There we go. Okay. Next, and then I'm going to pull in some of those locations. And we'll go through and upload the evidence accordingly. And that's it. Go through and submit.
Kevin, did that answer your question?
Mostly. So I guess what I'm getting at is if it's not shown as a enforceable commitment, and we challenge that, then the carrier might rebut our challenge that says that actually this is an enforceable commitment and you guys just missed it in your map. Is that, it's not showing as an enforceable commitment in the maps today. So if we challenge that, would that be, you know, something that the carrier might rebut and say that it was actually missing, that it was an enforceable commitment?
Yeah. So that would be this one here. So this is not showing today. And you would put in the technology.
I'm not the carrier here, just to be clear, I'm nonprofit.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and add that evidence, and you know, if you, yeah. Select
And
those
if the carrier were to do a rebuttal challenge, there's really no way for us to get those areas covered under BEAD. You know, that's up to the other program or whatever to actually enforce those commitments.
Ultimately, it also depends on the evidence that's provided during rebuttal, right? There are evidentiary standards for the rebuttal process as well, and
Okay.
that would be taken into consideration. So it's not just an automatic.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, Ben has a question about if a location in the challenge portal is designated as funded, the other status levels of served, underserved, and unserved are not available on a zone level. I'm not sure what a zone is, but somebody can tell me. What happens if the funding for the location is withheld and or infrastructure not built?
I think I'm not, I don't, Phil, do we need a little clarification of what we're asking there? I'm a little.
Yeah, if you create a zone in the challenge portal, and that's a group of locations, if those locations are indicated as funded, at the layer level, you cannot identify in that zone what might be served or unserved or underserved. It's just not available. If it's funded, you can't determine what locations might already be served or underserved.
And Ben, you're talking about an enforceable commitment, just to be clear.
I'm assuming it's a funded means enforceable commitment, correct?
So correct. And those areas would not, those enforceable commitments are specific to what would be service, considered served in terms of speeds and latency. So it would have to be, the enforceable commitment would have to provide at least 100 megabits down and 20 megabits per second up. So again, NTI was very clear that these locations not be duplicated with BEAD funding. So yes, we have to make an assumption that those will meet that service level. I hope that answers.
What happens if the funding is withheld down the road, or the infrastructure that the funding was meant for was never built? That's a timing issue down the road after the challenge window.
It certainly is.
And I think a lot of that depends on when that is identified or when that occurs, because if it is outside of, we were talking a little bit earlier about updates to the map and the timing of that happening. And I think a lot of it is dependent on what is in place when we go into the sub-grantee selection process, because that again is going to be a moment in time. So if things are occurring during then it will be visible to us, and it would probably be addressed at that point. Len, I think you have a comment on this. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. Ben is actually talking about one of the areas I've talked to you guys about. And the commitment is for 25 down, 4 up, which would be underserved. So is there a way to address that?
So I think Phil, you went off mute, but I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, that was Phil. If you want me to start, Phil, and then you fill in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you want to go ahead, please.
That's no problem. So this is what we're talking about in terms of challenging that enforceable commitment and providing evidence that the carrier either does not meet the standard for enforceable commitment, or if you have other evidence that the service is not going to meet the deadlines, things of the nature of that particular enforceable commitment, then you should provide that as part of this challenge if possible.
And both to Ben and Len, there are, very specific requirements for challenging an enforceable commitment. And so just check those out, both in IPv1 as well as the policy notice. We can put links to those in chat for you if you don't have those already. But that's where you would kind of look for the specific evidence. I would say it's a little bit higher threshold than some of the other types of challenges that we have out there.
What I'm hearing is that the evaluation for fundable areas is going to be double checked at the time of funding determination after the challenge window, based on current BDC filings after September, like you answered previously, and that would also take into account whether funding is still available or not for a particular location or group of locations. So what I'm hearing is that the map is somewhat, it's not final at the end of the challenge and rebuttal process. The map is always going to be looked at prior to, or the map and its current status based on BDC filings and funding changes possible. The map will be reevaluated at the time of funding for BEAD down the road. In other words, this map is not set in stone at the end of the rebuttal process, is what I'm hearing.
Sorry, Laura, I know you, go ahead.
No. I was gonna defer to you, and then if it's not covered, I'll mention it.
Yeah, I think, I think, as I mentioned before, it may not be. And so that, that determination is a mixture of the state working along with the federal government. And I think I really recommend that your best way to try to make sure that the state has the right data is to provide a challenge during the challenge process. This is your opportunity to ensure that your community is correctly indicated on the map, because once those locations are set in stone, then the CPUC can only use BEAD funding to serve unserved and underserved locations across the state. And so at that time, those locations cannot change. And we certainly are working very hard to try to get this data right. And we do need your help. Thank you.
But again, the challenge portal does not allow us to change a location from unserved to underserved. It only allows a challenge to go to served. That's it. So we can't challenge that issue.
I think that this is something that we'll have to take back and talk about and just verify that is accurate versus maybe it's in a different area in the portal. So we'll capture this question, and I think we just need to talk about it and be able to respond to you. We'll respond to you in email, and then also post that for others so that they know as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to our next question. If a location is listed as served by one cable provider and one fixed wire, I think that's fixed wireless provider, and a challenge of cable availability is successful, would this location be updated to underserved? And then does this logic apply to area challenge?
Oh, Amy, Laura, I can start off with this one and please add in. That's a great question. Thank you. If you basically have a fixed wireless provider and you obviously have a cable challenge and the cable challenge is successful, the determination of whether it is successful is not going to occur until at the very end of the whole BEAD challenge process. You go through the initial phase. There is, say, an availability challenge against a fixed wireless provider at the site. If sufficient evidence is provided, then the challenge will be upheld. It will go through a review and a rebuttal process. And at the end, it will either be upheld or it will be rejected. If it is rejected and there was, again, another challenge against that location by a fixed wireless provider that was upheld or was rejected because the service was there, then that will all be taken into account during the final determination of the BEAD challenge process. And that's when everybody would understand, what's actually there at the location. As Amy mentioned earlier, the whole intent of the challenge process is to get it right. So if there is no cable service at a location and there is valid fixed wireless service at a location, then that all will be adjudicated through the process. Does that make sense?
Phil, can I add that you have to, it may depend on whether the fixed wireless provider is providing what's considered reliable broadband service. And so, which is, licensed fixed wireless at a rate of at least 25 megabits per second down and 3 up to be in that underserved, and to be served, it's 100 by 20. And so you may need to challenge, if you are having issues meeting that with either provider, there may need to be challenges to both in order to have that location upheld. So it really, we are looking, as Phil noted, at the entire picture of those locations to make those final determinations, including the evidence on both the challenge and the rebuttal side.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Len. If a provider can update a map with the filing after the challenge process, isn't there a risk for abuse, or will those changes also be challengeable? I thought the rule stated the challenge process was final. And I don't know if we're prepared to answer that, or do we need a little bit more clarification, team? Len?
Sounds like clarification.
Yeah, clarification on that, Len, too. Thank you.
Thank you all for taking the question. So I was just sort of wondering about this as you were talking about essentially curing the map going forward, right? Which is an admirable process. But if it almost seems like there's an incentive potentially for an ISP to add information afterwards in the September filing and avoid the challenge process. And so that's what I was asking about. And if you take, for example, Ben's example, he wants to correct the map to the service that he's offering. But somebody else might want to change the map to something that's more favorable to them. So that's really what I'm just getting at, is sort of like how that works out. And, is there going to be a way to track and make sure what the changes are?
That is a very good question, Len. We expect, I think, everybody that participates in the BEAD challenge to process to engage in, a true spirit, the spirit of the challenge process. And, we can only encourage that in terms of providing accurate information, doing the correct challenges, and following the process through. And obviously, we cannot provide any guidance on that, but that's what is expected. Are they following the spirit of the process? That's, maybe that is, I don't know how else to answer that question, because, we all know that, that sometimes things are missed, or sometimes things quite as accurate as we'd like them to be. So I really don't think there's anything else we could really answer on that one for you, Len.
Amy, go for it. I think Amy wants to answer.
I want to add something, Phil. I put my nerd hat on a little bit, and you can step in if I'm out of line here. But so some of the process that can update the data after the fact would be, and this is really super nerdy, but you guys have heard this before, and you're familiar with what we're talking about. But again, if you're talking about the FCC fabric, just released version 5, and that the associated broadband data collection data that works with version 5 will not be out until November or December. if there's a true up, there are some rules around how that true up would work. And that's a true up, meaning the state takes everything and moves it to that version 5, which might add or subtract broadband serviceable locations. There is data associated with those particular locations that NTI has said how it wants the state to treat that. So it would not literally be everything that happens in a BDC filing and that would override. It would be specific things with respect to added locations that would require matching the BDC data. So that is, again, that is the question in the future. So again, this challenge process now is where we would really like to see challenges that get that data corrected. And that we'd like to encourage those changes to happen now, if possible.
Thank you. That does help.
All right, thank you for the question and also the answer on that. That was a challenging one. No pun intended, or pun intended. I think we need to laugh at this point. So from Kevin, my previous read of the rules indicated that 4G, 5G wireless solutions would be at max deemed underserved, or in some cases based on speed would be unserved. Is that still the case? If a 4G, 5G provider is listed on the map as served, is that a challengeable condition?
Maybe if you want to start with there, I can follow up on some of the technical stuff.
I think that is a good question that we will have to take back, because I think what you're talking about is the pre-challenge modification.
Yes.
And a location that may have been missed in the pre-challenge modification. So we will need to take that back and provide some advice on that. It's a great question.
Are you saying that should have been corrected already? And I'm not quite as sure I understood your response.
I'm not sure if that's what we're saying. What we're saying is we just need to take it back and actually like have an internal discussion to make sure that we're.
And Kevin, what might help is if you had a specific location that we could review as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing locations with the same wireless provider showing as served and underserved, you know, in the same census block. You know, kind of 4G, 5G provider showing us served and you know, a street over showing us unserved. It's exactly the same. Our understanding was that those would be at best unserved, or if their speed was lower, it would be, I mean, underserved. It would be the max that, you know, those kinds of technologies would be.
And if they're the only provider, that the pre-challenge modification does cover that generally, but yes, I think we do need to take that back.
Okay. Do you need me to provide addresses offline, or?
That would be, yeah, that would be super helpful. I'll put the BEAD email in there, and if you can, and I can't talk and type at the same time. If you can send those over there, along with just capturing the question, we'll have it captured, I think on our side, but just to make sure that everything's kind of in the same email, and that way we can take a look at those on the map when we're having that discussion. It'll be really helpful.
Okay.
Right, and to help clarify a little bit, like as far as like what happens like with the data itself, there's licensed fixed wireless, there's cellular licensed fixed wireless, and there's unlicensed fixed wireless. So each of those are kind of in different categories, and the map pre-modification was contemplating cellular fixed wireless. If that helps.
So will the maps show cellular fixed wireless as the type? Because it's just saying licensed fixed wireless and it's a cellular provider.
Yeah, I think if we get those addresses, we'll take a look at that and be able to drill down a little bit more on it and make sure. I know that one of the things that Len called to our attention was toggling a setting on and off, and it helped visualize things a little bit different. So we just want to make sure that what you're seeing is what is captured in the system. and be able to get back to you on that.
Okay.
So it looks like our last question is really just a confirmation of what Kevin is asking. So if you have if you have addresses that you would like us to check as well while we're checking the ones from Kevin's, please send it to the BEAD inbox and we'll look at those together.
Well, right now those locations are listed as served because of the cable. So I mean, it's fair, right? But once we remove cable, I wonder if there's a process to go back to all of these locations with the cellular wireless, fixed wireless, to determine to be underserved, because now it would be just one provider servicing the location.
So I think that, and Amy and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is kind of what we discussed a little bit earlier, that once we get to the end of the process, all of the evidence is evaluated. And when we say process, not the challenge phase, the entire 120-day challenge process, at which point we submit the final determinations to NTIA for them to look at and verify, and then make the absolute final decision on that. Like that is the point that we would know what the outcome truly is. We would be, taking what is coming in for evidence on challenges. We'll take what comes in for evidence on rebuttals. We'll make the best determination that we can based on the evidence that is provided, and then submit that to NTIA for them to know. So we won't actually know the final, whether things are flipped, whether things are taken, I don't want to say taken off the map because that is a very literal thing here, but if things are changed, we won't know that until then.
The locations that I'm speaking about are similar in that they will be the subject to multiple challenges, right? There's multiple carriers that are claiming things that don't exist on the ground. So yeah.
Well, surprisingly, we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to allow time. If there's one more question, we've got time for one more question. Okay, so there we go. Our last question, can we do an area challenge for locations that have more than one provider? Clay?
Yes, it's a little bit more policy related, but yes. So the area challenge is triggered by same provider, same technology type, same census block. So you would need to do that for each provider, each technology type, if you're trying to challenge more than one. But yes, multiple area challenges can be triggered for the census block.
Thank you. Okay, BEAD email is in there. We are getting a lot of emails, so I know that many of you that are on the call have sent things in. We really, really, truly appreciate your patience as we've researched things and got back to you. So thank you for that. Sam, if you can bring slides up, we'll just kind of cover the last little wrap-up pieces here. So we have one more set of office hours. I think it's on the next slide. Yes, so our last set of office hours for the challenge phase will be next Thursday. And then as most of you know, just a reminder that the challenge phase ends on August 6th. And after that, we'll go into just a period of reviewing all of the evidence for that, and then heading into the rebuttal phase. So prior to starting the rebuttal phase, we'll have a webinar specifically for broadband service providers. As we've said, it's open to everyone if you want to attend and just kind of see what that process looks like. We'll be going over what is required for evidence for different types of reviews, and just a walkthrough in the portal from what it looks like from their perspective. And then starting on August 15th and running throughout the 30 days of the rebuttal phase, we'll be having office hours specifically for that. Again, anybody is welcome to attend office hours. At that point in time, however, it will be broadband service providers largely who will be responding to rebuttals. So just letting you know, those are all available on our BEAD events page. You can sign up for them there. And then the closing slide is just kind of our standard information on additional resources, signing up for email updates, and the links to our various websites and pages. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for all of your questions. They've been really good questions. They have been very thought-provoking. And those of you that we need to take back, we will be able to get a response to you. I think we've kind of set a standard within about 2 to 3 business days, hopefully sooner. But just letting you know that that's kind of the timing for that. So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate this whole process. The success of that is dependent on your participation, and so you being here today and asking the questions is really meaningful to us, and we greatly appreciate it. So hope you have a fantastic afternoon. Hope to see many of you next week, hopefully because things are successful, but we're here to answer your questions. So thank you again, and hope everyone has an excellent afternoon.